Good afternoon. My name is Muhammad Ahmadi, and I'm enrolled in the counseling program, Clinical Mental Health, and this is for Counseling 515. About a few months ago, when the subject came about proposal and coming up with a question for our research, I was looking at social justice in another paper and came across the fact that the gap in that paper was the fact that it was done by women, and also the ones who contributed, the participants, were also all women and all involved in academia. I used that as my gap statement, and my question is about the fact that there has been no record of any research on white men of European descent to ask them about the whole idea of white privilege and white identity and how they react and feel about that. This is my abstract for my proposal. There are new hypotheses and constructs on the white privilege and endorsement of the white identity as the new paradigm to fight racism. The research and analysis in peer-reviewed journals concentrate on the significance of white privilege and white identity becoming a part of the curriculum in schools. However, there has been no analysis and studies focusing on non-academic white men to measure their reaction to the white privilege and the acceptance of the white identity. That's the abstract for my paper. The literature. The purpose of literature review is to make a compelling case for the study of how do white men reflect on anti-racist identity and racist behavior after discovering the historical identity of whiteness and the impact of white biases on the society. So that's the core of my research. Going through the literature, I came across Shand Lauber's Renee 2017, suggesting that there should be an anti-racist counseling identity amongst white counselors. However, there has not been any such a study, and the study in white mental health counselors with their unique inherited biases and racism could become the foundation of the anti-racist counseling policy. It will have a significant impact on the practice. The question here is how to help white counselors develop anti-racist counseling identity. Beima, 2020, bases his research on how white counselors should know and understand whiteness and its effect on mental health and the social system, suggesting that courses on whiteness will further improve counseling. The research has also offers cognitive emotional changes that would help the counselors recognize their whiteness. Again, they treat this issue of white privilege and white identity as something that is already has become the law of the land, which has not. This is basically a movement by academia, and there are researchers on it, But again, we have not seen any researches that allow white men to become a part of the participants in the research. And since white men are basically the ones who are supposed to be at fault, because that's the history of America, and white European men are a big part of it. Again, I did not see anything about the whole idea of white non-academic male being a participant in these researches. Again, they have looked at this issue through a lot of different paradigm and lenses, but that particular part of it, the actual white European man, is absent. Foster, in his research on applying critical whiteness in college students' development and theory, concludes that critical whiteness studies that expose the homogenic nature of whiteness and its harms have received less attention in students' research development and theory, although it could help white students influenced by the whiteness structures of the campuses. Again, the whole issue has been taken as a law of the land, and they're trying to first find it actually assigning certain way of teaching for the counselors to be able to deal with that. And they believe if the counselors don't admit to themselves about white privilege and white identity, they still gonna treat the black students with their biases. Further, I have Mulholland, 2017, writes about the omission in research and studies that relate to the whiteness and race, and how white children are the subject of the policy and academic debates in the exploitation of sexuality by the media in its production reach. Furthermore, how other colored young people are stereotyped to justify the structured whiteness of the society. Again, this is another lens, another paradigm, another idea, another research that it might be viable on its own, and it comes from journals that are peer reviewed. But still, the subject that we are looking for is absent in there. Morrow, 2020, focuses on how the phenomenon of the white supremacist, cis heteropatriarchy has been allowed to dominate socially in the schools and educational institutions, to run amok, bullying and microsocial repression of other marginalized minorities by systematic safeguard and justifying such aggression. This idea is rooted in the assumption that white supremacy and pathological whiteness spread mentally and psychologically at the micro level by the aggression and domination in bullying. Additionally, facilitating, perpetuating, and propping up aggression through white privilege sanctions. So again, this one even goes further, assuming that this aggression, this bullying, is part of what's innate in what they call white supremacist cis heteropatriarchy. And again, if part of that white supremacist cis heteropatriarchy is white men, they are not part of this discussion, and they have not been asked, and there has not been a research on them. How I'm gonna do the research is through qualitative research, because the emotional depth and the living history of the biases and discriminations are genuinely personal and closely guarded. Hence, there's a need for qualitative research to understand the feeling, values, and perceptions that underline and influence behavior. We need to capture the language and the imagery that the participants uses about the subject and their accurate emotional reflections. Such understanding of the context and the meaning of the answers and the ideas will enable us to develop new hypotheses for further quantitative questionnaires and development. So we need to use qualitative because this is something emotional, personal, and qualitative research allows us the best method to reach those emotions and those reflections and reactions. Method of collecting data, we choose phenomenological approach through interviews and focus groups, since the subject is emotional and deep, with many different connotations and implications. This is Gill, Bailey, 2018. I don't know if the citation on the last statement about qualitative research was by QRCA 2020, Qualitative Research Consultant Association. Sorry. And this methods and collecting data that, as I said, it's phenomenological approach through interviews and focus group, because again, especially with the interview, it's a back and forth. And that can cover a lot of different parts and connotation of the whole subject between the interviewee and interviewer. So it gives us the closest way of measuring the emotions and reactions, and allows us immediate back and forth of discussion. Okay. Cultural consideration. The focus here is on Americans with European ancestry. That is the historical legacy embedded in the history of racism. There must be a focus on the socio-economics of the participant. The concept is not against the individuals, but the systematic structure of white society. The blue collar background would not understand since they have struggled. So this is a subject that it's going to be alien to people who come from a blue collar background, because they have struggled financially as well. And they can see themselves as the oppressors. The higher middle class would think they have worked hard for their pieces of the American dream also, and they're undermined by a population that has not worked as hard, and the concept is mainly to shame white people. This is what the middle class and upper middle class white European descendants would think about this whole subject. And again, there's a need to go amongst them, see what's going on, and do a research with white men of European descendants. The citation here is Gillig A 2021. I'm going to drop the references at the bottom of my video. And there's also another part of this that I was not able to address in my paper, and that's the way Bible reacts and work with this social justice idea. What is Christianity and pastoral counseling say about that? What does Bible say about that? And I think I was able to get some, if I can find it here, sorry. Okay, yes. Well, it seems I do not have it right now, unfortunately. I thought I had it. But again, from what I studied in those Psalms and verses from the Bible is, again, do to others what you want to be done to you. And how, as a true Christian, you should care for justice for everyone. And you should make sure that there is equality, and there's a big emphasis on the orphans and widows and anyone who's not capable of taking care of themselves. Thank you for listening.